Hi, everyone. We'll give everyone about 30 seconds or so to funnel in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Awesome. Well, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for what will be a super insightful discussion on the impact of virtual sites had on a patient retention and cost efficiency in veteran populations. My name is Corey Davis, and I am Associate Director of Customer Success here at Curebase. I had the awesome opportunity to be the project manager on the study we're going to be discussing today, and I'm super excited to share some key information that not only made this study a success, but also what we learned throughout the study lifecycle. With me today, I have Dr. Chris Emerson, PhD, founder and CEO of Level, and Courtney Webster, founder of Nimbly Consulting. But before we get started, we're going to let them do some introductions for themselves. So Chris, we'll start with you. If you want to give us a little information about your background and tell us a little bit about Level, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey. And thanks to Curebase for hosting the webinar. Yeah, as Corey said, my name is Chris Emerson. I have a PhD in small molecule chemistry and I did a postdoc at Stanford working on synthetic chemistry and molecular biology, looking at paralytic shellfish poisons. Curiously, that's also how I ended up meeting Courtney as well. But when I left Stanford, I actually ended up on a cannabis farm. And that set me on this journey down the path of looking at cannabinoids and what cannabinoids really could do on the impact of human health. I spent a couple years at a biotech startup, which is where I met Courtney 10 years ago. We were working on novel antiviral therapeutics, and I was a chief chemist at that company. And then about 7 years ago, I left that company and founded Level, which the entire thesis of the company is effects-based cannabis products on emergent cannabinoid formulations that's not accessible from the plant alone. And part of the challenge and the opportunity for that is there's a dearth of rigorously collected peer-reviewed data out there on the impact that cannabis and cannabinoids actually do have on humans, which was a huge impetus for us to launch our initial observational trial with Curebase. And that's how we ended up here.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Courtney, I'll give you the opportunity to do the same.
Sure. So as Chris mentioned, I defected from academia and was previously an organic chemist, but about 10 years ago, got introduced into clinical research. So it was fun for Chris and I to really reconnect and see where our origins had taken us in separate directions, and then we could reconnect to do a clinical research study with his product. So my background, starting in clinical research with a company called Improve Health. So definitely born and bred on eClinical first and foremost. And then, as a company, a lot of what we were developing had to do with adopting consumer-facing approaches into the clinical research realm. So we were one of the first companies to do bring your own device clinical research. And then we just stayed on top of emerging trends, which got us to DCT. So how do we better, interface and engage those clinical research participants using tools and techniques that feel really friendly and comfortable to them? So after Improve was acquired by Signant, and after a couple of years there, I actually went on my own to start working with small sponsors like Chris to do their clinical research studies, and specifically focusing on how we could use DCT and integrated connected sensors and other technologies to really open up the playing field and gather new research like we did.
Thank you, Courtney. Everyone can probably see where this is going, but before we start getting into the patient retention pieces and the cost efficiency pieces, Chris, if you want to tell us a little bit about the study that you had done and maybe what the goals and objectives were for it.
Yeah, so the study was looking at one of the products that we have on the market in California with the cannabinoid that's called CBG or cannabigerol. It's very similar to CBD in that it has little to no psychoactivity that's perceptible for most people, but it seems to have a really powerful anxiolytic activity. And there's a few reports in literature that have been done, a few studies in in vitro looking at that. And so we wanted to look at that in a veterans population. I'm a veteran, so veterans issues are really important to me. And we wanted to really push on seeing if there was the potential to use, hemp-derived cannabinoids for to look at specific issues within veterans. So we looked at sleep as the primary endpoint, and using our CBG Pro tab, we designed a study that was 6 weeks long. All participants would wear a Fitbit so we could collect biometric data. Courtney can jump into this a little bit better than I can, but yeah, it was an Epro DCT design that had a 2-week run-in period where we could baseline individuals before they started taking the intervention product. And then we had a 2-week period where they were taking a 25 milligram dose per day. And then there was a dose escalation at the end of the first, at the end of 4 weeks. And then there was a final 2 weeks. And then it was placebo-controlled, double-blinded, and randomized. So we tried to check all the boxes. It was a heavy lift, and I definitely think we bit off more than we were anticipating. But we really wanted to come out of the gates and design something that we could stand behind, and that whatever the data that came out of it, we knew that it would that the data was impeachable, and we could stand behind it and then the analysis thereof. So
absolutely.
Courtney, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, did we bite off more than we could chew? Probably. We had a lot of challenges to address. I want to start by making sure the audience is aware that Chris's, sorry, I froze for a second. Am I back?
Yes.
You're back.
Tech issues. Yeah, so Chris's product being an oral tablet is really important. So not only what it does, is there not a lot of validated research on cannabidiol in and of itself. Cannabis research is challenging when you think about not only the quality of the product and the dosage control, especially. So a lot of studies are done with inhalables, and it's just really, really challenging to draw clinical grade conclusions there. So that was one of the reasons I was really excited about Chris's product and the potential to get really robust clinical evidence. Engaging a veterans population was absolutely mission oriented, but also very challenging. This is a very skeptical population. They have had varying experiences, right, as it pertains to their interactions with large institutions. They can be a little skeptical of where this data is going to go. Is it going to go on their record? What is that going to mean, right, in terms of their future with a military service or medical care? And so we had to tackle that very carefully. We had to think carefully about how do we recruit them from a trusted partner. I know we're going to get into all of these topics in more detail, but I'm just lining up all the challenges we wanted to address as we really approach study design. And then getting into the Fitbit, really wanting to select the right subjective data measure, but also the right objective data measure. Sleep is very challenging in and of itself to study. So we did sleep as our primary endpoint using the MOZ questionnaire, which is a clinically validated sleep questionnaire. Our secondary endpoint was actually a quality of life questionnaire. The veteran population has so many additional underlying issues, right? And we wanted to be mindful of that and make sure that we're addressing really the population as it exists in the wild, but also be able to track how sleep and quality of life are so intertwined. And as Chris mentioned, there are the pharmacoactivity of CBG has a lot of different effects. So we wanted to see what we could tease out. And then last but not least, we use the PCL5 as a monitor of overall anxiety, knowing that PTSD has a high precedence in this population and it affects sleep. And then the Fitbit was to help us objectively monitor sleep quality, heart rate and activity levels. Again, tying into all of these broad measures around quality of life and activity. So I'll stop there because I know we've got a lot more to dig into, but it was quite a challenge, a fun one to tackle and think about how do we approach this with a unique study design.
For sure. Thank you, Courtney. That was really super helpful insight. I do want to bring some light to all of the conversation that you guys had with veterans prior to actually initiating the study. I think that was one of the most important things that really helped you guys understand even better what that population was like. And so you spoke to a little bit of the learnings that you found through those focus groups, but if you want to talk about any additional learnings we had and maybe what those learnings did in terms of changing or influencing protocol design in the workflow.
Totally. I know that if, most people in the audience, if you're interested in DCT, you're interested in patient-facing and patient-centric study design. So we held participant panels really to do two things. One, to just get a better sense of what does a day in the life look like? What challenges are they experiencing? What, how can we better address their day-to-day and incorporate into their day-to-day experiences? And also just get their feedback on some of the things we had in mind for the study design. A few things that came out of that really made a big difference for me is just getting a much deeper and richer perspective of how anxiety and skepticism, right, are so integrated. So most of the time we're worried about people not completing their surveys. And I learned that this is an incredibly diligent patient population, or participant population, I should say, because they have a lot of underlying anxiety. They want to do the right thing. They want to get it done. They want to do it right. And so instead of worrying as much about will they be compliant and how often do I have to remind them, we started making sure they felt like they didn't have to get stuck. So they would actually get stuck and start overthinking the answers to their questions. So we really retuned how we introduced the surveys by saying, first of all, let me remind you, this isn't going on your military record. This data remains private. And secondly, do the best you can. We're just looking to get, your experience in your own words, because they would really get stuck and start to really overthink how to answer some questions. And then, so that really informed it, just skepticism of what the data was going to do and where it was going. And then also retuning, their comfort with answering these types of questions, especially when they've already seen some of them while getting care at like the VA, and just wanting to make sure that they understood how this experience was different than that experience. Chris, anything you want to add to that in terms of any big takeaways? You're a member of this community, so you knew what that was like.
Yeah, I think you touched on all the major points, Courtney. It's just a lot of skepticism, and they want trust earned, because they may not have been they know how large organization or government has treated them, or how they treat them in certain situations. And so I think what it also helped to inform was just, we already wanted to go in there and try and, for lack of a better word, humanize as much as possible the interaction, to let them know, like, look, you're just not a cog in this bigger thing. We want you to understand that we care about you participating, and we want you to know that it's really important. So I think that really helped us, that reinforced for us that the study design we were going for, and taking the extra steps, which we'll probably get into, especially with the CRCs, that it was actually vital to the outcome for success of the study. So that was another big thing I took away from those early listening sessions that you had done.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And I guess that leads us into another topic, is really how all of those learnings impacted the retention. I believe, if I remember correctly, 80% of patients assigned an informed consent actually completed the study. And to Chris's point earlier about the study design, it's not a very quick study. We're talking 43-ish days of surveys a couple times a day. So Courtney, I think this contributed heavily to obviously all the things we put in place, and we've collaborated a lot to try to determine what would make sense for the patient, while also driving the study in the right direction. So you kind of touched on the notification and the CRC thing, but if you guys want to speak a little bit more to that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to start that off. So, how do I say this? I don't want to be divisive, but one of the frustrations I have with incorporating technology into clinical research is that we can sometimes lose the human element, right? Or maybe we make assumptions. So again, the promise of DCT is we can reach people where they are, we can recruit more diverse patient populations, et cetera, et cetera. But when we do that using tools and technology that maybe folks aren't that comfortable with, if we don't take into account where they are, and then we lose that human element, that's just a big warning sign for me. And it was something that we came in wanting to avoid. So again, being informed by some of the really digital and fully remote studies that I grew up with as I was learning clinical research, people drop off quickly. Like they get really excited, and maybe you get really high enrollment rates for just a, hey, do this in 5 minutes using your own smartphone type study. But they drop off. So what is it that's going to keep them there, keep them engaged? And so what we decided to do was, because this was a fully remote study, we worked with the Curebase team to say, can we specifically assign a CRC to certain participants? So rather than just say, hey, when would you like to call us? Now that's great for them to have that type of flexibility. When would you like to do your check-in? But really making sure that each time they spoke with the exact same person. So there was relationship building over the course of the study. We also really worked with the CRCs to create relationship building questions so that that interaction did not just need to be, do you understand? Are you doing the right thing? Let me kind of bark at you a little bit. If you're not, thanks so much, bye-bye. You know, we really wanted them to feel like we were connecting with their why. They joined the study to help other veterans. So, you know, we wanted to reinforce that. We wanted to show appreciation. We wanted to make sure they felt supported. And that came back. You know, a lot of folks repeated that back at the end of the study, that they really valued those relationships. They felt very supported. Yeah, that was huge. I think that was a big element to our high retention.
I think that is also true. I do want to look, while you kind of gotten into it, into some of the participant feedback we did see. So one of the components of this study was at the end, we asked them questions about their experience with the study, with the platform itself, things of that nature. So these were, there was an open text field for people to kind of provide how they felt about this study. And Courtney, if you want to speak a little bit to this, and maybe if this was different than you expected, the same as you expected, were you surprised by any of the statements that you were reading?
Yeah, that's great. And I want to address a quick question. So we got a question from the audience about what a CRC was, and that's our fault for just continuing to use abbreviations and jargon. CRCs were clinical research coordinators. So these were their one point of contact on the research team. And again, that's why we wanted to make sure we cultivated more of a relationship and had them get to know this person as they went through the study. Was anything surprising? I mean, I just, the middle statement there about being safe and cared about really jumped out at me. I don't know that we hear that a lot from study participants. And to me, it just validated that the intent was delivered. We intended this, we designed for it, we trained for it. But to hear that come back to us at the end of the study was a huge win. So that was big. The next to last one about reflecting on their day, this is interesting. This was another thing that we thought carefully about how do we check in with this population and just get a sense. There were a couple goals. Obviously, we wanted to eliminate confounding variables. So if we wanted to have a thesis that CBG impacted their quality of life and impacted their sleep, we need to get another, sense on what else was going on in their life that might have changed how they're sleeping or affected their stress levels. And we thought carefully with them on how do we ask them how they're doing each day, and to have that be essentially a moment of reflection unintentionally. We weren't intending to have them take a moment and reflect on their day and kind of self-assess. But it was nice to hear that that led to some introspection on their end. And they hinted at that as well about the Fitbit. Being able to see their metrics on a day-to-day basis was very interesting for them as well. And that, I think, speaks to everyone's interest, right, in being able to track their own behavior and activity.
Chris, what about you? Seeing these statements kind of at the conclusion of the study, what are your thoughts about them?
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised with a lot of them. I you know, the second one from the top, you know, we really went out there and you know, it was for lack of a better word, we wanted to show up and demonstrate that it wasn't just lip service we were giving people during recruitment, saying, look, we're doing this, we're trying to pay it forward for other veterans, so your participation in this is hopefully future proofing how we go about helping veterans in the future. And so I think it's easy for things to be said but no action, and for it to be hollow. And so as we go through that, we did a whole recruitment video, the two co-sponsors, myself and one of the veterans group, to try and make this a very personal thing. And with the introduction of a lot of different types of technology, DCT platform, Fitbit, that there can be a real resistance for change, obviously, but then a lot of change at once, and you can scare people away. And so fast forward now to the end of the study, and to see, yes, that people are like, look, this was great, and I feel like I was actually doing something that could benefit veterans, or I actually felt like someone cared about me, then yeah, I think we completely delivered on what we were hoping to from the beginning. And it's pretty amazing to see, because you never know how these things are going to end up, right? And there's a lot of challenges, and you've got to really work through a lot of different things. So I'm really pleased with how it turned out, and a lot of the feedback that we received from the participants, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. I think that was one of my favorite pieces, is kind of to see the outcome. A lot of times you don't actually get to see that. And so that was really, really valuable information. And I think you started to touch on this, Chris, but this was a very challenging population to recruit for. So not only are we talking about just a small portion of the population, meaning veterans, but we're also talking about specifically in one state, as well as people that are going to be using a cannabis product, which obviously has compliance concerns of its own. So I guess one of the things that we found out very early on was that we wouldn't be able to use traditional recruitment methods in order to make this happen. So Chris, what were the ways that you guys went out and found these patients to participate in the study?
Yeah, the recruitment was an incredible challenge. As Corey said, we were limited to California only because we're a licensed cannabis operator in California. And even though the CBG we were using has 0 THC in it, so there was nothing in there that was actually regulated. There's fairly draconian regulations that we have to be in compliance with. So we had to maintain in California. We were limited on how we could get people research product, which was another huge barrier that we had to overcome. And so we really leveraged veterans groups that either we knew or could get introductions to, and we pitched them on them acting as advocates and support groups, again, to help us find individuals, and then also to offer support in a way of obviously not coercive, but if people had questions, or if they wanted to understand, that they weren't alone through this process, there were these groups of veterans that we used. We had limited success with that, I think, and we tried, email campaigns and targeting veterans groups as we, bought email lists and things like that, and that was challenging as well. What worked really well for us was, there's 1,000 dispensaries, retailers in California that you can buy cannabis at. So we had a whole easel back program where we would make these easel backs to inform people, put them in the dispensaries. So people coming in, they would see it. And I think that was pound for pound, that was the most successful recruitment tool we actually had. So, but yeah, recruitment was a serious challenge for us in this study.
Courtney, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say, I'm sure everybody here has learned that you just have to stay creative, right? And you have to keep trying new techniques. I do really believe in recruitment through advocacy groups, because I think with challenging populations, hearing who aren't used to clinical research, hearing about it from someone they trust is really important. But Chris is right, so we tried that. We got some conversion from it, but we just had to keep adding on different methods. And yeah, so we just stayed nimble, frankly, and kept trying different things. And once we found that the right blend of folks seeing advertisements when they went to a dispensary, plus being on an email campaign, plus hearing it from a advocacy group that they were part of and trusted, I think all of those things did make a difference. We finally got over that hurdle.
I know somebody's going to have this question just really quickly. It's going to be around why there wasn't a direct to patient advertising campaign, which is very, very often seen in this DCT model, whether that be Facebook, Google, Instagram. Why couldn't we use those?
That's exactly what I was going to follow up with, Corey, because we're cannabis, we're not permitted to use those, right? So we tried. We don't have the normal social distribution channels that everyone else has access to. So Facebook doesn't allow cannabis companies to do any type of outreach on there. And we even set up ancillary pages that were not associated with cannabis that would link to the study page, and the algorithms, they would find them and just shut them down. So we couldn't use any traditional social tools for direct outreach.
I can imagine that not doing direct-to-patient marketing ads also saved some money in the long run. You guys did choose a DCT model. You also went about recruitment in a different way and things like that. If you want to speak a little bit to what cost efficiency you might have seen. I know a lot of times in this model, what we say is sometimes there's a higher upfront cost and a big reward later. So interested in your guys' experience with that. And if that's a factor that led you to the DCT model, what were the things that you guys were thinking about revolving around cost?
I'm going to let Courtney answer the lion's share of this, but she had a Herculean task, because I was like, hey, Courtney, I want to do the study and here's the budget. So let's figure it out. And she did an amazing job of figuring out how we were going to navigate this, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the budget is. You're always going to find challenges, whether it's recruitment, you're going to find ways to get over that budget. And so really being creative and figuring out what is the best return for the decisions you're going to make strategically is vitally important. And with Courtney's background and then her diligence and incredible detail-oriented nature, she navigated this for us. So
yeah, I can speak to the big cost drivers that we were evaluating. The tech platform was a huge one. And really early on, Chris and I were having conversations. There are a lot of different platforms out there, and there are some kind of do-it-yourself or self-service where you configure it, and we were going back and forth on like, do we go that route because we'd really save on cost? Do we go with a more established DCT platform? And I would say what really helped in our study was that there were obviously some cost drivers that we didn't have to worry about. We didn't have to worry about a ton of expense related to clinical testing or laboratory testing or, other things like that. And ultimately, I mean, we avoided, Curebase was our CRO. So having one place that both provided a top-notch DCT focused tech platform, as well as the virtual clinical research coordinator, having all of those in one place made our lives a lot simpler. And again, different study design with different complexities and different components that maybe that wouldn't have worked out, but we were able to do it. And honestly, just minimizing the number of vendors and stakeholders in the process was huge. I would say there was some careful consideration in the Epro questionnaires that we were choosing as well, those can be huge cost drivers. And so we had a question come up from the audience about just selection criteria for quality of life. So I'll answer that, but I'll also just say that in general, our selection criteria for the Epro questionnaires was the same way you do it for anything. We want to look at just, was it clinically validated in a similar population? Is it asking the questions that we want answered, and just making sure not just that it's a sleep questionnaire, but is a sleep questionnaire that's representative of our population. And then also cost was a factor. Was it open source or was it licensed? And we kind of had to go back and forth on that for a while in study design. One last thing just on the quality of life questionnaire is I specifically was looking for a quality of life questionnaire that was validated, not just for physical. A lot of quality of life questionnaire have to do with how you physically can take care of yourself during the day. Can you open a jar? Can you reach things on a high shelf? We wanted something that was a little more holistic. So I selected the HUDAS, which asked about whether or not they were able to engage with their community. It was validated on a number of conditions, not just physical, but also psychological conditions as well. And so that was really important in our selection criteria.
Thank you for that. I think that was all very, very instrumental to kind of like the whole thing. You kind of mentioned the Epro selection. And I think at the beginning, when we were designing the database and looking over the protocol, et cetera, I think we made at least one protocol amendment, not only to be flexible with the Epro, but also to ensure that we were translating the schedule of events into something that worked in the DCT models, so that we give everybody ample opportunity to do everything they needed to do. Obviously, Courtney, like Chris alluded to, your work was instrumental with this. You have an amazing background in this kind of thing, which made this really, really it was really helpful. In my opinion, I think the collaboration and the design of the database, and as well as all the rigorous UAT that we did, the preparedness of just you guys in general, I think really, really led to us being very successful in the implementation. So I guess you kind of spoke a little bit to how we function together, but was the outcome exactly what you imagined the collaboration to look like? Obviously, you guys chose going with full CRO instead of doing a lot of it ad hoc yourself. Do you find that that was helpful? How was your experience with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We could have done, I really appreciated it. I think that, like you said, we worked really well together. We knew there were challenges. We stayed honest with each other. No research study is flawless. They all have hiccups. And so I really appreciated, and coming from your position, Corey, I think I joked early on, I'm either going to be a great client or I'm going to be the worst client, because I've been in your shoes. I know all the things that can go wrong. But it worked out great, because I think we came into it with realistic expectations. We addressed the nuances and the complexities early on. And then we tried to be as nimble as we could. I just like that word, right? Because there were a lot of different challenges and a lot of changes. And the tight communication that we had was fantastic. And the ability that we really had a direct line to the clinical research coordinator team. And so we could really get feedback in real time on how people were engaging with them, how people were responding. That helped quite a bit.
I do see, to shift gears a little bit, there is a question in the chat that says, did you have any difficulties during the e-consent procedures? One of the things I do want to share as we start to talk about this is just another patient feedback part of that survey that was put out, and really about the simplistic use of the actual study application. To see, like, this is very transparent data, came directly from the source. I was honestly shocked to see this, to see that literally every single person either stated that it was, they strongly agreed that it was very easy to use, or they agreed, which is still a very strong statistic. Courtney prepared the coordinators very, very well for the e-consent discussions. And if you want to speak a little bit to that, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, e-consent is definitely an art. The way we approached this is we did have that discussion occur in real time with a coordinator on the phone. So we didn't just hand them a document and say, hey, do you have any questions? Again, focused on that relationship building. We actually had them sit down, walk through it together, take their time, and so I don't recall any specific difficulties. We certainly had folks decide not to join.
Yep.
We had folks realize that they either didn't have time for this study, they didn't. I can't remember if anyone explicitly decided not to join because it was placebo controlled, but that was in the back of my mind. Hey, I might get a sugar pill and I won't know, right? And so, but I think having that conversation helped quite a bit, and I was very happy for people to self-select and say, actually, I don't think I have the time for this the way, you want us to. And that helped. We didn't have to go chase them down or annoy them. And again, that was a great, I really appreciated our study population. They were very open and honest once that trust was established. So the burden was on us to establish that trust. And then they've been very communicative and very honest since then.
One of the very unique things that we got to experience in this very recently is the unblinding of all the study participants. So that's not something you see super often. So I am very curious from both of you, really, what led you to decide to do that? And what do you think is going to come out of doing that?
Well, Chris, you and I had some discussions early on to say, are they going to know? I think, again, having a non-psychoactive version of cannabis, but there are some really interesting questions in the, psilocybin research and other things like that. Like, how do you do it? How do you blind someone? And so we had some questions about that. I'll say something quickly and then let Chris weigh in, just that our duty doesn't end when the study ends, right? I think it's important. I've heard some anecdotal, and there's obviously some great research out there too, about how little people hear once they finish a study. And one of the things they want to know the most is, did this thing help me or not, right? And so it was important to us to maintain that communication and not just have them not hear a word from us when the study ended, and have them be informed so they could know if they felt a benefit, they can get CBG, right? It's available off the shelf, but we wanted them to know so they could make the best decision for them about how it made them feel.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we've been working with cannabinoids for a very, very long time, and CBG is incredibly, incredibly nuanced. And it's one of those things where, and this is all empirical, what I'm providing at this point, but most people, they don't realize that it's actually having the desired impact until, until they realize, like, whoa, wait, I'm not as stressed, or I'm not feeling my anxiety. And part of it too is we were really looking at CBG for sleep. There's some other cannabinoids out there, such as CBN, cannabinol, and that is very sedating. It is sedating. Like, people are using it for sleep, and there's going to be a lot of studies coming out with it. But generally in California, it sells really well because people take it and they go to sleep with it. CBG is much more nuanced. It doesn't have that impact on it. And so part of what we were trying to do too is to see if we could have an impact on sleep by addressing some upstream effects, such as anxiety, right? So there was a lot of nuance in the study design itself. So that being said, because we understood that people may not know that it was having impact, is also a big reason why we wanted to use biometric data, because I think, the Epro may be different than what we pick up from the biometric data. And that's another thing we wanted to test as well. So we wanted to unblind it so people could understand, hey, if I actually had the study intervention of there's actually had an API in it, then they can go out and find it, or they can find other things and they can explore it. And if not, and they felt that if they had the placebo and they still had a positive impact from it, then yeah, maybe it gives them a pause to reflect or to figure out what behavior change they might have had during that time, as well. So we felt it was important that people understood what they took.
Mhm.
I definitely appreciated that. I really look forward to seeing when we do get responses. I'm sure somebody's going to have something to say about that. So I'm super excited, but we are getting a little bit close to time. So I'm gonna just wrap everything up, and if we can then take some Q&A, but I do want to kind of do an overview of kind of our key takeaways from this talk. And I think the first big one is really knowing your population is key. I think from the focus groups and all the listening sessions that you guys have done really led to being able to create a study that was really, really successful and that patients really enjoyed being a part of. Another one I think would be just the virtual site really provided a lot of flexibility for not only the patients, but also cost. Obviously, we saw from our conversation that there was some cost effectiveness that we did see out of that. And really the third big one is just the collaborative nature of sponsored to Curebase was just very, very critical to its success. Even though Courtney said, all this stuff that we did at the beginning might have made me think she's the worst client ever. I truly agree. I truly don't think the study would have ended up like it did without that collaboration and that very close niche conversations that we had. And really just risk mitigating everything we possibly could. So thank you both, but let's take some questions. I think the first one I saw come through is just wondering how much contact the study subjects had with clinicians, doctors or allied health versus study coordinators. Courtney, I think you could speak a little to that one.
Yeah, I'd actually love to address that because it's something we haven't gotten into yet, which is how do you address tricky questions and have a population that might experience a crisis feel supported. So the way we approach this is we decided not to screen out for suicidality, which was a big study design decision. I know it's very common to do that. People are very afraid of the risk, but with this population, it's part of the reality, unfortunately, right? And so we didn't screen that out explicitly. We instead had some triggers built into some of our questionnaires that if someone responded in a way that indicated that they might be at risk or experiencing a crisis, it immediately triggered a call to a flag to our medical monitor, who is a clinician with experience treating people with trauma. And so she would reach out immediately and have a conversation with the participant to address, whether or not they were feeling like they were in a state of crisis, talk about different mechanisms of support that were available to them. And the note, honestly, that was phenomenal. I did not know what to expect. And obviously it's scary to be dealing with patients that might be experiencing a crisis and not know how to best support them. But they were very open with her. They felt very supported by that phone call. Her intent was, again, to say, hey, we're here for you. We know what's going on. How can we help? And obviously, we had to be very clear that we couldn't provide direct medical treatment, but just having that real-time feedback and then having the way she approached that be framed in a very supportive way was phenomenal. So that's how we facilitated those interactions, as well as obviously any safety alerts that came through. Some of them were very minor, like someone got a rash from their Fitbit, which happens. But we want to make sure, obviously, that there's a close connection to medical personnel.
Thank you, Courtney. And I think you just talked about a Fitbit. The next question is related to Fitbit. Can you talk about how the Fitbits got to the participants and how did they learn how to use it?
Yeah, so we did logistics ourselves. That was another way to simplify. So with Chris's product needing to be carefully managed within the state of California, it was easiest for us to bundle the Fitbit or to do all of the logistics ourselves. So we directly shipped the Fitbits to the participants. We included an instructional card that helped them figure out how to use it. Honestly, a benefit with consumer-facing wearables is they're designed to be fairly intuitive. And so we obviously had a couple, technical back and forth with devices maybe not working, but someone not figuring out how to use it, frankly, just wasn't a problem. And it was something we addressed carefully. You can't make assumptions. We wanted to be inclusive and make sure that, someone who wasn't tech savvy could still participate in the study. But yeah, it really wasn't a problem.
I was very surprised by that, to be completely honest. I do think that the simplicity of connecting it, I think, was really easy too. As long as they had an account, all they had to do was like log into their Curebase platform profile and just click connect, enter their Fitbit password, select some attestations confirming that they give permission. And it was as simple as that. And I think like not having to go between things, they didn't even have to look at it again if they really didn't want to. Obviously everybody kind of did. And then I think the other important piece of this is that all these patients got to keep the Fitbits after, which I think was really awesome, because as they started to get in the routine of seeing all this data, it might have been something that they wanted to continue using. But yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and Corey, I'm glad you mentioned just the integration, because participating in a couple other studies, there are many study designs that have data coming from various apps. But you just, having it all in one place, literally having them click a button within the application they were already using and then never have to touch it again was great.
For sure. Courtney, this one might be for you too. Can you, the question is around the statistically sound nature of the 55 population size. I know we talked about this throughout the course of the study, we took careful consideration of the dropout rate. We were really expecting it to actually be more than it was. So I want to speak to a little bit about the statistical nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a full statistical analysis plan. We had done sample size calculations to make sure that based on the change that would be clinically significant on the questionnaires and the endpoints, what was our sample size? So 55 is small, but it is statistically sound. But we did have a number of conversations. We were aiming for 100 participants total, 50 in each group. And so as we really dealt with those recruitment challenges, we had to, go back to that data and make sure that if our sample size was just lower because we were just having so much challenge recruiting folks, that we could still get statistically sound data. And that was incredibly important to Chris, right? Mm-hmm. There were a lot of interesting things coming out of the study and a lot of interesting things about the way we did it, but we really, really wanted robust evidence. So yeah, it's a small sample size, but we took care to make sure that we would get statistical significance out of it if we see the effect we're hoping to see.
For sure. And I would, just because I thought it was a very, very good approach. Do you want to talk a little bit about the male versus female kind of decision there and how we actually made sure that it was reflective of the true population?
Yeah, well, yeah, gosh, there's so much I can talk about for the study. So the veteran population has a 90% male, 10% female. And so we decided, we wanted our study to reflect those averages as much as possible in both the control group and the active investigational product group. We actually got a lot more females. I don't know what that means. I'm kind of interested in digging into that a little bit as we prepare our publication and finish our data analysis. But we did have to keep kind of a tight pulse on our sex ratios in each arm and, keep an eye on our randomization and make sure that it was still being balanced. But I think our final percentages were more like 20% female. And we ended up having to stop enrolling females because we wanted to keep the population of our study as close to the kind of average population as possible. Hadn't had to do that before.
Love that. Okay, so another question, and I could probably take this one. There's a question about whether or not there was an EDC integration into the platform. For this study specifically, there was not one because it was one virtual site. The source actually acted as the EDC, and we were actually able to give level up all of the data they needed straight from the eSource itself. Another one, does Curebase platform have a mobile interface? At the time that we conducted this study, they were able to log in via mobile. So they can log in on the web, on the computer, they can log in mobile. However, Curebase did just launch their mobile app. So we do actually have an app for the future studies where they'll actually be able to go ahead and get push notifications and all those things that might actually increase retention as well. Another one here, did you use an IRT vendor to drop ship the CBG to patients directly? Courtney, you kind of spoke a little bit to this, but just if you want to summarize, that would be great.
Well,
No, we, oh, go ahead, Chris.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to deliver it through our own licensing. So because of the nature of how the study is in California, so we actually had to deliver all product through our partners that were licensed. So it would be a lot easier, right? If this study would look very different if I could drop ship product. And an interesting point is that CBG is it's a cannabinoid that's found and isolated from quote unquote hemp as well. So the big CBD industry, you can get a lot of CBG as well. So, and that's not regulated. That can be shipped across state lines. You can do a much larger study, which is what the intent for us was. Let's do this pilot study, get our feet wet, learn a lot of lessons, and then look at doing a nationwide study using hemp-derived CBG, and which would remove a lot of the barriers and the challenges that we just navigated. It changes the complexity of the study for sure. But within California, we handled delivery through our licensed partners.
It was definitely a unique situation. I want to speak a little bit to the blinding that actually occurred so that everybody can kind of understand that a little bit better. So the Curebase platform actually randomized all of the patients into two groups per this randomization schema. We had them tagged as treatment A and treatment B in the Curebase platform. So no one at Curebase actually had any insight into what drug or placebo anybody was receiving. And so we just took the treatment A and treatment B and gave that over to Webel's group who was doing the shipping. And there was a single person essentially that was doing the shipping of all of that. And that was the only unblinded person that we had. So I thought that was really unique, a really good way of doing it, especially when you are transferring randomization codes across the place. So it was really successful though. It worked really, really well. All right. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Awesome. Well, I do want to thank you both, Courtney, Chris. I know your time's super, super valuable. So I do want to thank you guys for sharing your time with us. Just for everybody that is watching, there will be a recording of this webinar available that you guys will all get super soon. If you do have any questions about anything we talked about or want more information, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always willing to share these key learnings and really make it so that everyone can have these really successful opportunities within the DCT space. So thank you guys again, and look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for taking the time.